Two girls missing for 4 years, found after mountain woman's dog, entered a secret cave. It had been 4 years since the McKinley girls disappeared. 4 autumns had come and gone, each one stripping the pine-covered hills of Garland Ridge with a silence Riley Monroe never used to notice. But this morning, the air clinging with mist, the sky still bruised with early dawn, Scout's growl shattered that silence like a rifle crack. Riley stopped mid-step, her thermos sloshing coffee onto her flannel sleeve. Scout stood at full attention on the ridge behind the cabin, every muscle taut, hackles raised. She was pointing, almost unnaturally still, at a broad limestone outcrop hidden behind a thicket of wind-tangled brush. "Easy, girl," Riley murmured. "It's just the woods." But Scout didn't move, her lip curled. A low snarl vibrated from her chest, not fear, warning. Riley dropped to a crouch and reached for the leash clipped to her belt. Too late. Scout lunged, vanishing through the fog like a dart of smoke. "Scout!" she hissed, heart jarring. "Damn it!" By the time Riley reached the outcrop, she could hear Scout pouring something. Not earth, rock, and something else. The metallic sound of nails scratching at stone mixed with muffled yips, not excited ones, frustrated, urgent. Then the bark, sharp, twice. Pause, once. Riley froze. Scout had a code, military style, one she'd learned years ago from a friend who trained CR dogs for FEMA. That bark meant discovery. Object located. Not animal. "What is it, baby?" Riley murmured, pushing through the brambles. Her forearms stung from thorns, but she barely noticed. Scout was now half-crouched beside a moss-covered slab, old limestone, maybe 6 feet wide, propped oddly against the side of the ridge. And poking from underneath it, dirty but unmistakable, was fabric. Pale blue. Riley pulled it gently. It gave with a wet sound, revealing a child's handkerchief, its edges frayed, but the swan embroidery still visible. Dainty, faded, clean. She brought it to her nose. Antibiotic cream. And something else, mild antiseptic. Not wilderness filth. Scout barked again, one short, then silence. Riley didn't tell her to hush. The McKinley girls. Gone without a trace at ages 10 and 7, last seen in a parking lot outside a dollar depot 4 towns over. Vanished just like that. Riley remembered the case. Everyone in 3 counties did. Riley rose slowly. The mist was lifting, but in its place was a sickening clarity. She should call Sheriff Denton. She didn't. Instead, Riley tapped the side of her vest, activating the satellite link she kept hidden beneath a loose flap. There was only one person she trusted with something like this. "Cal," she said when the signal connected. "I need you. Now." "Where?" "My cabin. Back ridge. Bring your gear, and your silence." She didn't wait for questions. Scout sat now, ears forward, eyes locked on the slab. She wasn't barking anymore. She didn't need to. The forest had given up one of its secrets, but Riley knew this was just the start. Because if that handkerchief was still clean, someone had been keeping them alive. The handkerchief lay on Riley's kitchen table, sealed in a freezer bag beside a steaming mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Scout rested nearby, chin on her paws, eyes flicking toward the bag every so often. The dog hadn't relaxed since sunrise. Neither had Riley. She had spent the last 2 hours cross-referencing every missing persons report in the region. Pinefield County. 4 years ago, 2 girls, Avery and June McKinley, ages 7 and 10, last seen wearing denim jackets. One of them, Avery, had a habit of carrying embroidered handkerchiefs her grandmother made. White swans. Riley stared at the pixelated photo on the sheriff's database. The stitchwork was identical. 4 years, she whispered, and it's been here all along. Scout lifted her head, ears twitching, reading her tone. Riley reached down, brushing her hand over the dog's coarse fur. You found it, didn't you, girl? You always know. Outside, the Wyoming wind rattled the shutters. The isolation she'd once craved now pressed against her ribs like a weight. She used to tell herself the silence of these mountains healed her. But now, that silence felt complicit. It had swallowed 2 children without a sound. Riley was no stranger to loss. After her daughter, Kayla, died in that roadside accident 12 years ago, Riley had left everything. Her veterinary practice, her house in Denver, her marriage, and come here, to a cabin on the edge of nowhere. She told herself she was saving what was left of her sanity. But deep down, she knew the truth. She'd been running. Scout had been the one thing that forced her to keep moving. The Dutch Shepherd came into her life as a rescue, half-trained, half-feral, and completely unwilling to give up on her. It was Scout who dragged her back into the rhythm of living. Morning hikes, feeding the hens, marking the seasons by the color of pine needles on her trail. And now, the dog had dragged her into something else. Riley pushed away from the table and grabbed her keys. Come on, girl, let's go talk to Denton. The drive down from Garland Ridge was treacherous this time of year, patches of ice clinging to shadowed curves, elk tracks crisscrossing the road. Scout stood braced in the passenger seat, nose to the cracked window, watching every turn. Riley envied her confidence. She hadn't set foot in Pinefield town in almost a year. When she stepped into the sheriff's office, heads turned. She could feel the scrutiny, the polite distance. People still remembered Dr. Monroe, the military vet who'd quit medicine, the recluse with the search dog who patrolled the woods like she was guarding ghosts. Sheriff Ed Denton emerged from his office, heavy-set and grey around the eyes. Well, I'll be. Riley Monroe in town. What brings you off the mountain? She set the evidence bag on his desk. This, found it behind my ridge this morning. Recognize the design? Denton frowned, leaned in. Could be anything. Kids drop stuff all the time. Not this, Riley said, sharper than intended. It's been preserved, smells like antiseptic. Someone's been tending to it, keeping it clean. Riley. Denton sighed. We all remember the McKinley case, but that trail went cold years ago. We had volunteers out there for months, helicopters, dogs, federal agents. They're gone. I know you mean well, but nothing. She cut in. Your people searched marked trails. You never looked where Scout led me today. That ridge is off map. Denton leaned back, unimpressed. And you think after 4 winters up there, 2 little girls are just waiting. I think someone used those mountains, Riley said quietly. And I think it's not over. For a long moment, the sheriff studied her. Behind the window, the snow lightened to a steady drift. He finally shook his head. You've been alone too long, Riley. Sometimes the mind... Don't finish that sentence. Scout, sensing the shift, stood, hackles raised. Her low growl rolled through the room. Denton's deputy froze mid-step. Riley reached down and touched the dog's collar. Easy, girl. The tension cracked, thin as glass. Denton raised his hands in surrender. All right, I'll send a deputy up tomorrow. Take a look. But I'm not reopening that case without proof. You'll get proof, Riley said, collecting the bag. You just don't like where it's pointing. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky opened to a hard, blue coldness. Riley climbed into her truck, Scout leaping in after her. For a long moment, she sat with her hands on the steering wheel, staring at the empty street. She could feel the ache behind her ribs again. The same hollow she'd felt the day Kayla's school bus never came home. Loss had a sound. It wasn't screaming or crying. It was the silence afterward. Scout nudged her arm, whining softly. Riley looked at her. Yeah, I know. We're not done. She drove straight past the turnoff to the cabin, heading deeper into the forest road instead. Scout's ears pricked forward, tracking every scent through the open window. The farther they went, the narrower the path became, hemmed by evergreens heavy with snow. Riley followed the coordinates she'd marked on her map earlier, stopping where the road vanished into an unbroken sheet of white. Scout jumped out before she could grab the leash, bounding towards the tree line. "Scout, wait!" The dog stopped 10 yards ahead, paw raised, nose low. Then she looked back at Riley, expectant, intense. Her silent command was clear. "Follow me." Riley's breath misted as she crouched beside her. Beneath a drift of snow, she spotted tire impressions. Faint, but recent. Not ATVs, a 4-wheel truck, no chains. That meant someone local, someone confident enough to drive these woods in winter. She traced the tracks with her glove. "You were right, girl. Somebody's been here." Scout whined, her body trembling, not with cold, with focus. Riley rose, scanning the trees. The ridge loomed above them, cloaked in pine and fog. She felt that same pull in her gut, the old instinct she thought she'd buried after leaving the Army's veterinary corps, the part of her trained to recognize when something was wrong long before the evidence caught up. This wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just a lost relic. Someone had kept these woods clean for a reason. Scout nudged the handkerchief bag still in Riley's coat pocket, then sat down squarely, eyes locked on the forest beyond. "Yeah," Riley whispered. "I smell it too." The wind shifted, and for just a moment, beneath the rustle of pines, she thought she heard something faint, a metallic clang, distant but deliberate, like a gate closing. Riley turned toward the sound, every muscle in her body tightening. "Come on, girl," she said softly. "Let's see what else the mountains are hiding." System resists. Dog persists. At precisely 5:42 the next morning, Riley felt the thud of Scout's paws against the cabin door. The dog didn't bark. Not yet. She just stood there, tail stiff, ears locked forward toward the line of trees behind the bluff. Riley tightened the strap on her flannel, grabbed the field journal, and nodded. "Show me." Scout didn't need to be told twice. She bounded forward, her nose low, weaving through underbrush like she was chasing something not quite there, but deeply real. Riley followed in silence, boots crunching frost and pine needles as they climbed toward the ridge. Scout stopped abruptly near the same slate boulder where the embroidered handkerchief had been found. She sniffed the base, then looked up at Riley with that same urgent intensity she'd had in Fallujah during a collapsed compound search. "What now?" Riley whispered, crouching. Then she saw it. On the stone's edge, where lichen had receded just slightly from moisture, were shallow, ragged lines. Not from erosion, not natural. Claw marks, no, fingernail marks. Someone, likely small, had scraped desperately at the stone with bare hands. And just beneath one line of scratches, barely legible, the letter A, or maybe H. The grooves were erratic, weak, like whoever had carved them had barely enough strength to press down. Riley's pulse thudded in her neck. God! She took photos. Scout began pacing now, not randomly, but looping back again and again, nose dipping in a widening spiral. Something held her attention. Riley tried not to read too much into it. She'd been through this before. False trails, false hope. But Scout wasn't just a dog. She was trained for this. Still worked better than any radar in the backcountry. Back at the cabin, Riley didn't hesitate. She dusted off her old satellite modem, plugged it in, and shot a message to the one person she still trusted from her past life. Olivia Grant. 10 minutes later, her screen blinked to life. Olivia Grant, still alive out there, Monroe? Riley Monroe got something. Weird. Could use your nose. Olivia Grant, yours or the dog's? Riley Monroe, Scouts. Mine's retired. Olivia Grant, send me coordinates. Be there by nightfall. Riley exhaled. If Olivia was coming, this was real. By 6:10 p.m., Olivia's rented Tacoma rumbled up the dirt road. She stepped out in tactical boots and her signature black ball cap, hair still cut short like the old days. She carried a compact scent collection kit slung over one shoulder. "You're serious," she said, barely finishing her greeting before Scout charged up and licked her knee like an old comrade. "She never does that," Riley muttered. Olivia crouched. She remembers. They didn't waste time. Olivia listened as Riley recapped the events, the sullen bark, the handkerchief, the scratches. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Could be nothing. Could also be a missed dump site. But that fabric, antibiotic scents not from animals. That's a person, a cared-for person. Scout led the way again, her movements sharper now, more insistent. She wasn't just tracing memory, she was on a track. Olivia paused every few meters to test wind drift and air density, then gave quiet nods. Riley felt the weight of old training come back. The rhythms, the breath management, the silent eye contact between teammates. The dog froze near a thick cluster of mountain laurel. Olivia moved forward carefully and parted the vines with her gloved hands. "What the hell?" she whispered. Behind the curtain of foliage was a fissure in the rock. Not a massive cave mouth, just a split maybe 2 feet wide at its base, tapering upward. But it was unnatural, at least unnaturally concealed. Someone had deliberately woven and placed the vines across it, with dead branches arranged to mimic fallen debris. Olivia dropped to one knee and ran a sensor wand near the opening. "There's airflow." Riley stepped closer. "It's hollow. Deep enough for oxygen exchange." Olivia confirmed. Scout pressed her nose into the edge and gave a low growl. No panic, just tension. "She's telling us someone went in here," Olivia said. Riley swallowed. "Or never came out." They marked the location and retreated for better gear. Headlamps, rope, thermal sensors. Night was crawling in fast, but before they left the spot, Scout did something that made both women stop cold. She pawed the earth near the cave's entrance, then laid down, head pressed flat, ears back, like she was listening to something underneath the soil itself. Then, without a sound, she looked up at Riley. And Riley understood. It wasn't over. Whoever had scratched at that stone hadn't been lost. They were still waiting. Buried. Alive. Or just still in there. Waiting for someone to believe a dog's bark meant something more than noise. Waiting for someone to listen. Scout didn't wait for permission. 1 second she was sniffing at the vine-covered fissure. The next she'd wedged her shoulders through and disappeared into the darkness. Her bark echoed once, then faded into an eerie silence. "Scout!" Riley's voice bounced off stone. She dropped to her knees and yanked away the curtain of laurel vines, widening the gap. "Damn it, she's inside!" Olivia swung her flashlight toward the opening. "That's a tight fit." Riley exhaled. "We've crawled through worse." They clipped their headlamps, cinched gloves, and slid inside, one after the other. The rock swallowed sound. The air turned cold, sharp with the tang of rust and damp earth. Riley could hear Scout's claws scraping ahead, steady, cautious. The passage was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Every breath stirred fine dust that glimmered in the beam of her light. After 10 yards, the tunnel widened into a low chamber. Scout stood in the center, nose to the ground, tail stiff and still. Riley crouched beside her and caught the smell before she saw it. Iron, faint but distinct. Old blood. "Olivia," Riley whispered. "You smell that?" Olivia nodded. "Someone bled here, not recently, but enough to seep into the soil." They swept their lights across the chamber. A pile of torn fabric lay near the far wall, flannel, once pink, but now the color of ash. Beside it, half buried in sand, something glinted. Riley brushed it free. A small bracelet, silver-plated, with the name June etched in block letters. Her throat tightened. It's them. Olivia took out her camera, snapping photos. This isn't random. Someone used this space, shelter, storage, maybe confinement. But the airflow's engineered. Look up. Riley raised her light. Above them, thin cracks ran across the ceiling, deliberate ventilation cuts between layers of rock. Someone built this, Olivia said. Someone who knew the terrain. Scout's sudden growl cut her off. The dog was at the far wall now, pawing at a collapsed section where roots dangled through. She barked twice, sharply, and backed away. What is it? Riley whispered, crawling closer. She pressed her ear to the wall and froze. There was a hollow resonance behind it, an empty space, deeper than the chamber they were in. Olivia frowned. Second cavity, sealed off. Riley tapped it with her flashlight handle. The thud was muted, but unmistakable. This whole ridge is a shell. They stayed another 20 minutes, mapping the space, marking GPS points. By the time they emerged into daylight, both women were coated in dust and quiet. Scout shook herself off, sending a fine spray of dirt into the air, then trotted to Riley's side, panting, proud. Riley sank to her knees, rubbing the dog's neck. You did good, girl. You always do. Olivia stood at the opening, arms folded. We can't keep this quiet anymore. This isn't local law enforcement territory now. I know, Riley said, and they're going to hate that I found it. 2 days later, black SUVs wound up the mountain road. The letters FBI flashed under the morning sun. Riley stood outside her cabin porch, Scout at her heel, as agents in windbreakers swept the clearing with cameras and drones. The lead agent was younger than she expected. Early 30s, crisp haircut, the kind of posture drilled by both the Bureau and guilt. He introduced himself without warmth. Special Agent Ethan Holloway, he said, shaking her hand briefly. You're Dr. Monroe? Just Riley's fine, she replied. He glanced at Scout. And this is the witness? She's the reason you're standing here. He offered a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. We'll see about that. Riley watched as he gestured his team forward. They moved efficiently, cordoning off the site, taking samples, photographing every inch of the rock face. Holloway crouched near the entrance, running gloved fingers along the vine stems. Someone worked hard to keep this hidden. Why'd you go digging here? Scout led me, she said simply. He arched an eyebrow. A hunch, then? Riley's jaw tightened. Instinct, and a scent pattern that matched a missing persons report you apparently shelved 4 years ago. That hit. His face flickered, just slightly, before hardening again. We follow evidence, not folklore. Tell that to the 2 kids you couldn't find. The silence stretched. Olivia shifted beside her but said nothing. Holloway finally straightened, brushing dust off his knees. We'll need your statement and the dog's behavioral notes. Then I suggest you stay clear while we process the site. Riley folded her arms. She's the only one who can track through that terrain. You'd move twice as slow without her. We have our own K9 units, he said too quickly. Scout huffed, as if understanding the insult. Riley knelt beside her. Ignore him, girl. He's city-trained. That almost earned a smirk from Olivia. By sunset, the team had excavated part of the chamber. Holloway approached with a small evidence bag. Inside was a child's hair clip, blue plastic, tarnished with rust. Found this under the sand. DNA's pending, he said. If it's what you think, we've got probable cause to expand the search radius. Then you admit it's real, Riley said. I admit it's something, Holloway answered. As the agents packed up, Riley noticed him slip a folded photo back into his jacket pocket. For a heartbeat, she caught the corner. 2 girls, same age as the McKinleys. "You have family, Agent?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. Had. Then he walked away. When the last SUV rolled down the slope, Riley stayed at the cave entrance with Scout. The air was cooling fast, night pressing in. Scout's ears flicked toward the dark opening, every muscle alert. Riley touched her head. "They'll dig the ground and file reports, but you and we'll find where this really leads." Scout looked up at her, eyes bright in the dusk, then turned back to the cave, giving one single, deliberate bark. It wasn't fear. It wasn't command. It was a promise. The FBI had packed up most of the gear by the next morning, but the unease stayed behind. Riley could feel it hanging in the air, thick as fog and twice as stubborn. The Bureau's bright yellow markers dotted the hillside like weeds, but Holloway hadn't come back to the cabin. Not yet. Riley was pacing on the porch when Scout pricked her ears and rose from her spot by the steps. A government SUV was crawling up the gravel drive. Holloway climbed out, sunglasses still on despite the overcast sky. He looked different in daylight, less clean, more human. "Morning," Riley said flatly. "Dr. Monroe." She folded her arms. "If you're here to confiscate my coffee now, you're too late." He smiled faintly, then turned serious. "We ran the bracelet. Belonged to June McKinley, confirmed. We're expanding the grid. But there's something else you should know." He hesitated, then added, "Off the record." Riley raised an eyebrow. "That's never how something good starts." Inside, Holloway laid out a stack of sealed documents. He didn't explain where they came from, and Riley didn't ask. The pages were stamped with faded military insignia. Program Dandelion, Department of Youth Reintegration, established 12 years ago. "What is this?" she asked. "A government-funded mentorship program for orphaned or displaced minors in rural areas," he said. "They called it protection. It was supposed to place vulnerable kids in supervised facilities up here in the Rockies. But 5 years ago, an internal probe found irregularities, financial and otherwise." "Otherwise?" Riley pressed. "Allegations of abuse, some confirmed, others buried." She scanned the list of participants, her pulse spiking when she saw the name. Avery McKinley. They were part of this. She murmured. Holloway nodded slowly. "Avery was registered under that program before she disappeared. I was part of the investigation before it got shut down." "You were what?" "Internal affairs. I was assigned to audit Dandelion after reports started surfacing. The case was sealed under federal order before we could finish." Riley stared at him, reading the guilt behind his composure. "So you knew." "I knew something was wrong," he admitted. "I didn't know it would end like this." Scout, who'd been resting by the window, suddenly stood and trotted to the door. She gave a short bark, then another. Riley's instinct flared. Something outside. They followed Scout down, the slope behind the cabin, the pine floor soft underfoot. The dog moved with a laser focus, nose brushing the ground, tail rigid. She circled a wide spruce, then stopped dead, pawing at the roots. Riley knelt, brushing away pine needles. A small hair clip, blue plastic, lay half buried in the soil, still intact, still glossy. She touched it and froze. It was warm, not just sun-warmed, body-warm. Olivia, who'd just arrived from town, leaned over Riley's shoulder. "That hasn't been here long." Scout began pacing again, nose to the wind, turning toward the ridgeline where the forest thickened. Riley held the clip in her palm, trying to steady her breath. "Ethan, how far does your program reach?" He hesitated. "Farther than it should. You think someone's still running it?" she said. He didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Riley turned the clip in her hand. Plastic doesn't hold heat that long. Someone dropped this minutes ago. Scout whined low, eyes fixed on the tree line. Then she barked again, one sharp warning that cut through the air like a blade. Riley's heart kicked. "Scout, what do you smell?" The dog didn't move, just stared toward the slope, ears forward, body tense. Then she began backing up slowly, a motion Riley knew too well. It wasn't fear, it was positioning, guarding. Ethan scanned the trees. "We need to go back inside." Riley shook her head. "If she's alerting, someone's still here." The forest answered with silence. No birds, no wind, just the faint sound of water dripping somewhere deep among the rocks. Then, from the shadows between the trees, a figure moved, a flash of grey coat, boots crunching gravel, and gone. Ethan drew his weapon, signaling for them to stay back, but Scout was already in motion. She lunged forward, stopping short where the tracks began, a set of footprints, small, barefoot, leading downhill. Riley crouched, touching the print. Too small for an adult. Could be one of the girls. Ethan's jaw tightened. Or bait. They followed the trail halfway down the ridge before it disappeared into a shallow creek. The footprints ended abruptly. No splash marks, no continuation. Whoever it was had vanished mid-stride. Olivia exhaled. "This isn't random, Riley. Someone's playing with us." Riley turned toward Holloway. "You said the case was buried. Who buried it?" He hesitated long enough for her to see the conflict written all over his face. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." He looked towards the forest, jaw set. "The same people who built that cave." Scout gave a low growl, deep in her chest, as if confirming it. Back at the cabin, the fire crackled weakly in the stove, but the cold had settled into Riley's bones. She cleaned the mud off the hair clip, placed it next to June's bracelet, and watched the metal of the clip fog slightly under the warmth of her breath. "They're alive," she whispered. Ethan didn't look at her. "You don't know that." Scout did. She trotted to the door, stared out into the darkness, then turned back to Riley and placed her paw gently on the table beside the clip. The gesture was quiet, deliberate. It wasn't hope. It was certainty. Approximate 5,800 characters, written in American English, Maria Goodovage style, per your exact instructions. The wind clawed at the forest like it was trying to peel something hidden off its bones. Riley crouched low in the underbrush, her breath visible in the cold air. Olivia was just behind her, eyes sharp but uncertain. Scout stood rigid, body taut as a drawn wire, his nose flicking toward the west ridge where the old ranger station used to be. He gave a low whine, not out of fear, but urgency. "We're too far off the designated path," Olivia whispered. "If HQ finds out—" "They won't," Riley cut in. "Ethan made sure they're all chasing shadows up near the timberline. That wasn't a mistake. He wanted us away from here." Scout started moving again before either woman could say more. His stride was slow, deliberate. Tracking. 10 minutes of silence passed before they reached it. The old outpost lay sunken into the hillside, like something nature had tried to forget. Its roof was partially caved in, vines curling through the shattered windows. But Scout didn't hesitate. He trotted to the side wall, where planks had been ripped loose. Fresh marks, recent splintering. Riley moved forward, brushing aside a hanging tarp someone had tacked up as crude cover. Inside was nothing but dust, rot, and a feeling that pressed against her lungs. Olivia stepped in behind her. "It's empty." "No." Riley's eyes swept the floor. "It was recently used." Scout sniffed toward the far corner, tail rigid. Then, in a blur, He snapped his head around, hackles up, body between Riley and the open doorway. His growl rumbled deep, primal. Riley turned just in time to hear the crack of a rifle. The bullet bit into the ground 2 feet from her boots, kicking up a mist of pine needles and dirt. "Down!" Olivia yanked her hard. Another shot rang out, this one closer. Scout lunged forward, barking so fiercely the forest echoed back with layers of his warning. Riley caught a glimpse of movement in the trees, just enough to mark a figure ducking behind a granite outcrop. "We're being herded," Olivia hissed. They bolted, Scout leading the charge, weaving through the dense pine and scrub. Riley felt the heat of adrenaline crawl through her neck, each breath raw from the cold and fear. Bullets didn't whistle this close unless someone wanted them to know they were being watched, but not killed. That was the worst part. They weren't being hunted. They were being warned. After a hard sprint through rocky terrain, they reached the base of the waterfall. The one locals used to say led to nowhere, just a sheer drop and slick walls no human could climb. But Scout was fixated. He circled the pool's edge, barked once, then pawed at a cluster of hanging moss. Behind it, a narrow slit in the rock face. "Another cave?" Olivia asked, breathless. "Scout's never wrong," Riley said, pressing her hand to the cold stone. Water sprayed down from above, soaking her sleeve as she slid sideways into the crack. Olivia followed. Scout slipped in last. Inside, the light vanished. It smelled of damp earth, old stone, and something else, sickly sweet and recent. Scout stopped, his ears perked toward a tunnel leading deeper. Then it came. A voice, barely above a whisper. "Please." Riley froze. Her spine straightened so fast it hurt. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Olivia nodded. It wasn't echo. They moved carefully, Scout leading now in silence, his body low, head sweeping. Another whisper echoed down. "I'm here." They reached a bend in the tunnel. Riley flicked on her penlight, the beam slicing through darkness like a scalpel. That's when she saw it. A bloody handprint smeared on the stone wall, small, child-sized. Her chest tightened, not from fear, but fury. Scout sniffed at the ground and barked once, sharp, clear, not a warning but a call. Someone else was down here, alive. Behind them, the sound of water shifted. Someone had entered the passage. Riley spun around, light up. No one. But when she turned back, the whisper was closer. A single word. "Help!" Scout growled again, this time low and protective. He positioned himself against Riley's leg, body pressed in close. She knelt beside him, her fingers finding his ruff, grounding herself. "We're coming," she whispered back. "Hold on." Then they moved, deeper into the dark, where truth waited like a trap. And someone, somewhere, still had just enough breath left to beg for rescue. The rock face was slick from mist, its jagged mouth yawning like something ancient and long forgotten. Riley flattened against the wall, boots careful not to crunch the brittle moss underfoot. Olivia crept behind her, flashlight beam shaking. Scout led the way, low, steady, his movements calculated, almost reverent. He paused before the narrow entrance, ears alert, nose working overtime. They slid into the darkness, the air inside dense with damp stone and something older. Decay, maybe, or sorrow. Riley's shoulder scraped the cave wall as they eased in, 1 foot at a time, flashlight cutting through the thick blacks. Scout pressed forward, tail low, not wagging. No sound, except the occasional drip of water echoing from some hidden crevice. Then, a shift, a rustle. Human, not animal. Olivia gasped. Riley raised a hand to still her. Scout stopped dead, his ears pricked. Then, from deeper inside, the faintest whisper. "Scout?" Riley's breath caught. She pressed deeper into the cave, flashlight steady now, heart pounding not from fear, but hope. Another whisper, stronger. "Scout!" And then the beam hit them. 2 girls huddled in the shadows. They looked feral, hair matted, clothes ragged, cheeks sunken, but their eyes locked onto the dog with something raw, something that bloomed into belief in seconds. Scout took a step forward. The smaller of the 2 girls clutched a tattered faux fur bag tight to her chest. The other's arm was wrapped in a dirty cloth, dark with dried blood. Her lips trembled. She opened them, but no sound came out. Riley lowered herself to her knees. "My name's Riley, this is Olivia, and that's Scout. He's the reason we found you." The taller girl stared at Scout like he was a ghost. "He barked," she rasped, "just like before." Riley's throat tightened. "Before?" The girl nodded slowly. "When they took us, he barked. We heard him." Olivia's eyes darted to Riley. "Riley, look at the bag." Riley turned her flashlight onto the old furry pouch. There, wedged in the seams, was a torn photo, faded, stained with water and time, but familiar. It was a child's face, one Riley had seen in a cold case file almost 4 years ago. One of the missing girls from the youth shelter scandal Ethan Holloway had investigated and buried. Riley reached out slowly. "You've had this the whole time." The smaller girl, couldn't have been more than 13 now, nodded. "She gave it to me. Said if we ever found the dog in the picture, we'd be safe." Olivia's voice dropped. They knew Scout, before all this. Riley ran a hand through her damp hair. "This isn't just a rescue." Scout moved closer, nosing the injured girl's hand with a gentleness that brought tears to Riley's eyes. She leaned into him, whispering something too soft to hear. The younger girl finally let go of the bag and crawled to Riley. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave us." Riley shook her head, voice cracking. "Never." Behind them, the cave moaned with wind, like the forest exhaling. Scout didn't move. He stood like a sentry beside the girls, eyes trained on the darkness behind them, as if daring it to try anything now. And just before they turned to leave, the taller girl whispered again, Is he still out there?" Riley didn't answer, because she didn't know which he the girl meant. Ethan? Someone else? All she knew was that something still wasn't right, and someone was going to great lengths to make sure these girls were never found. Scout let out a low growl, not warning, not threat. A promise. They weren't done yet. The cave trembled with the roar of water outside. Riley's flashlight flickered as she tightened her hold on the girls. Olivia stood guard near the entrance, pistol raised, listening for movement. Scout paced restlessly, nose twitching toward the shaft of light leaking in through the wet rock. They were almost out when Scout froze, growling low. Riley knew that sound. It wasn't warning. It was recognition mixed with fury. A figure stepped into the light, then another, then 3 more, all armed. Ethan Holloway stood at the front of them, soaked from the storm but calm. Too calm. His FBI windbreaker was gone. In its place, a plain tactical vest, unmarked. "Step away from them, Riley," he said. His voice was steady, colder than it had ever been. "You weren't supposed to find this place." Riley's chest tightened. "So it's true. You were part of it." "I wasn't part of it," he said quietly. "I cleaned up after it. You have no idea what's buried under these mountains." Olivia shifted her aim towards him. "Looks like you do." Ethan raised his hand, signaling the men behind him. "Put the guns down. They're not who we're here for." Scout barked, a sharp crack through the cave that made one of the men flinch. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Control your dog, Riley. He's the only one in this cave I trust right now," she said. The smaller girl clung to her sleeve. "He helped them," she whispered. "He was the one who came before. With the van." Riley turned slowly back to Ethan. "You were transporting them." His silence was answer enough. She felt her blood run cold. "They were just kids." "They were leverage," Ethan said. "And if you think you're walking out of here, you're wrong." Before Riley could react, Scout lunged forward, teeth bared, forcing Ethan to stumble back. One of his men raised a rifle. A shot cracked. Scout yelped. "Scout!" Riley shouted. She dropped to her knees as he limped back toward her, fur on his shoulder torn, blood staining her sleeve. Ethan barked another command. "Stand down! I said alive!" But another gun cocked behind them, a different click, closer, sharper. "Funny," said a familiar voice from the shadows. "You still sound like you're in charge." All eyes turned. A woman stepped into view, soaked to the bone, hair tied back, face lined by years and guilt. Riley blinked. Linda Hayes, former military vet. Once Riley's closest colleague before she disappeared into some private security contract in Montana. No one had heard from her in years. Linda raised her pistol, steady and unshaking. "Drop your weapon, Ethan." His mouth twisted. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she said. "I told you years ago, whatever you were doing in that program would come back around." Ethan laughed once, dry and bitter. "You always thought you were the conscience, but you signed the same contracts." "I tore mine up," Linda said, "and now you're going to answer for what you did to those kids." He took a step closer. "You won't shoot me." Linda's eyes flicked to Scout, bleeding but standing, his body still between the girls and the men. Then she fired. The shot hit Ethan in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Chaos erupted. Shouts, the echo of boots, the sharp smell of gunpowder filling the cave. Riley grabbed the girls, pushing them toward the narrow exit. "Move!" Olivia covered them, returning fire into the shadows. Linda's voice boomed over the noise. "Get them out, Riley. I've got your back." Scout limped forward, refusing to stay behind. Riley's hand brushed his collar, guiding him through the crevice. The girls scrambled ahead, slipping on wet rock. Outside the air was ice and mist, the waterfall roaring beside them like a living wall. Behind them, more shots. Then silence. Riley didn't look back. She couldn't. "Across the stream!" Olivia yelled, pointing. The current was strong, swollen with rain, but it was their only path down. Riley waded in first, cold biting her to the bone. She pulled the smallest girl close, guiding her foot by foot across the slippery stones. Olivia came next with the older one, her jaw set, eyes scanning the tree line. Scout followed, limping but determined. Halfway through, a bullet struck the water inches from his flank. Riley spun. Ethan stood at the edge of the waterfall, one arm bleeding, gun raised. Then, from the darkness behind him, Linda appeared again. "No more," she said. Ethan turned. She fired once. He dropped, vanishing into the pool below. The mountain swallowed the echo. By the time they reached the opposite bank, Scout collapsed against Riley's knees. She pressed a hand to his wound, clean but bleeding heavily. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're okay, boy." He looked up at her, panting, eyes clear even through the pain. He licked her wrist, tail thumping once against the mud. Riley glanced across the water. The waterfall roared on, hiding every trace of the fight. Olivia helped the girls wrap themselves in emergency blankets from her pack. "We can't stay here," she said. "Whoever else was part of this, they'll come looking." Riley nodded. "Then we keep moving." She looked down at Scout, blood still seeping through her fingers, and met his steady gaze. He'd led them through darkness, through gunfire, through lies older than any of them. Now he limped forward again, head high, nose tilted toward the valley below. Not broken. Not done. Because Scout wasn't just following orders, he was leading them home. Riley didn't remember the helicopter ride out. All she remembered was Scout pressed against her leg, steady as a heartbeat, and the two girls clinging to her like lifelines. Olivia sat across from them, knuckles white around the straps of the med bag. The older girl, Lena, they'd learned, was slipping in and out of consciousness, her arm clutched tight, swollen and purple. Her sister Mira hadn't spoken since they fled the cave. The rush of rotors above barely drowned out the chaos in Riley's chest. It wasn't until the helicopter landed at the nearest staging outpost that reality hit. Flashing lights, armed agents, paramedics rushing in. Scout jumped out first, pivoting back to check on Riley as if he knew exactly what was at stake. He didn't budge, from her side, as she cradled Mira down the ramp. "I've got her," a medic said, reaching for the girl. But Mira flinched violently, holding tighter to Riley's coat. "It's okay," Riley whispered, brushing a tangled strand from the child's face. "You're safe now. They're just going to help Lena, all right?" Scout leaned forward and gently pressed his snout to Mira's shoulder. She nodded. That's when Riley knew. Whatever scars these girls carried, they had trusted Scout first. Then her. And that meant something she couldn't put into words. Ethan sat handcuffed in a reinforced trailer 20 yards away, face bruised, rage barely contained beneath a smug exterior. He'd been caught with enough evidence on his comms gear and burner files to link him to at least 2 other operations. But none of it compared to what Linda was about to give them. Riley stood outside the makeshift holding room, watching through the one-way glass as Linda, her old field partner, once decorated, once a friend, now sat with her hands folded, preparing to burn the entire scheme to the ground. Inside, Linda's voice was steady. "You think this is about money?" she said to the agents across from her. "You think Ethan was just a middleman for trafficking data or controlling youth shelters? No, he buried everything under a fake educational NGO for at-risk rural girls." But it wasn't just about exploitation. It was about erasure. These girls, they were meant to disappear. One of the federal attorneys leaned in. "How many?" Linda's mouth tightened. "More than these 2, at least 7 confirmed. 3 are unaccounted for. I tried to stop it once. I thought Ethan was bluffing when he said the cave system was off-grid. Then one day he disappeared for 2 weeks. When he came back, he knew how to hide children from the census." Silence wrapped the room like steel wire. The prosecutor nodded. "And Riley Callahan? Why did you warn her?" Linda's jaw clenched. "Because she doesn't give up. Because when they tried to shut her down 4 years ago, when she kept asking questions no one wanted answered, I stayed silent. And Scout? That dog never forgot the scent. I wasn't going to stay silent again." Later, in the briefing room, Riley sat beside the 2 girls, wrapped in thick grey blankets. Scout lay at their feet, resting his head across Mira's worn sneakers. Lena, her arm now in a sling, looked up at Riley and whispered, "Are they going to send us back?" "No," Riley said gently. "No one's sending you anywhere without your say-so. You're staying with me for now, until we find out everything." Olivia raised an eyebrow across the room, surprised. Riley met her gaze, calm and certain for the first time in years. "They don't need another shelter. They need someone who sees them." The words hung in the air. No press, no headlines, just a quiet truth she'd needed to live herself. By dusk, Ethan had been formally charged. The FBI filed sealed warrants to raid 2 of his shell organizations. Linda, under federal protection, began a full deposition to the task force assigned to investigate the hidden operations. It would take months, maybe years, to uncover the full extent. But for now, 2 girls weren't in the dark anymore. That night, Riley sat on the front steps of the ranger station, Scout beside her, the two girls asleep inside. The stars shimmered cold and sharp above the forest line. She reached down, brushed the fur between Scout's ears and whispered, "You found them. Again." Scout didn't move, just blinked once, as if to say, "I was always going to." For the first time in a long while, Riley didn't feel like a woman running from ghosts. She felt like someone who could give light to others. Someone who maybe had found her way home. There was no need for offense. The mountains kept to themselves up here, and so did Riley. After the trials, after the testimonies, after the photos of Scout with her muzzle graying and the girls now safe, fed, and in school, Riley had quietly returned to the cabin. The media had moved on, the headlines faded. But the girls still wrote her. One had started calling her Aunt R. The other sent drawings of Scout. The cabin had a new coat of paint, courtesy of the town's volunteer group, but the soul of it remained untouched. Weathered wood, a porch swing, and Scout still curling beside the front door like a tired sentinel. She was slower now, her back legs stiff in the cold, but she still lifted her head when leaves rustled wrong. Every evening, Riley lit the old lantern and sat beside her, not to watch, not to wait, but to be present. Sometimes Scout would let out one sharp bark into the trees, not out of fear, not out of need. Because she remembered, it was the first autumn frost when the students came. 4 of them. High school journalism kids, armed with recorders and clipboards, polite and a little nervous. They had hiked up under the pretense of a school project on mountain heroes, but it was clear they wanted something deeper. They gathered in a semicircle on the porch, careful not to disturb Scout. "Mom," said the tallest boy, "we were wondering, why stay here, after everything? The girls are safe. The bad guys are in jail. Why not come back down?" Riley didn't answer right away. She looked out past them, past the trees now tipped in orange and gold, into a forest that once swallowed screams and now hummed with wind. She pointed to Scout. She didn't bark for attention. Riley said, voice low. She barked because someone was still waiting to be found. Silence held for a moment. Then a camera shutter clicked. Later that night, after the kids left with flushed cheeks and big plans for a documentary short, Riley stepped out to check the sky. Stars spilled overhead. Scout was there, eyes half closed, her chest rising slow but steady. Riley ran her, hand gently down her back. "Good girl." The wooden sign out front, newly hammered into the dirt, caught the lantern's glow. Carved by hand, uneven letters read, "She barked for the ones no one else could hear." There would always be lost ones, some never found, some not ready to be. But Scout had taught her that searching wasn't always about rescuing. Sometimes it was simply the act of listening for the silence. Riley turned in for the night. Scout stayed, eyes toward the trees, still guarding, still listening. What's your story with a loyal pet? Share it with us in the comments. And if you believe in stories that honor the bond between humans and dogs, hit subscribe. Your voice helps us keep barking for the ones still out there.